Thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Chaburah of the Rabbi Norman Lamm Kollel. My name is Alan Sector. I am the new Associate Dean of Development for REITs. Today's Chaburah is dedicated L'zecher Nishmas Rabbi Meir Kramer, in whose memory an endowed fellowship has been established by his son, Rabbi Daniel Kramer. A few words about Rabbi Meir Kramer, Zichron Livracha. A 1940 graduate of Yeshiva College who was ordained in 1941 and earned his LLB degree from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Rabbi Meir Kramer consecrated his life to the service of the Jewish people as a congregational rabbi in Philadelphia and is a highly respected practicing lawyer who wrote extensively on legal matters that earned him an outstanding reputation. A student and devotee of the late revered early presidents of Yeshiva University, Rabbi Dr. Bernard Revel and Rabbi Dr. Samuel Belkin, Rabbi Meir Kramer was among the pacesetters of Yeshiva University's Torah Ummah philosophy by combining his educational background as a rabbi, university lecturer, and legal practitioner at a time when few rabbis had distinguished themselves in these multiple careers. We're pleased to dedicate today's learning in his memory. Rabbi Josh Fagin currently holds the Rabbi Meir Kramer Esquire Endowed Kollel Rabbinic Fellowship in the Rabbi Norman Lamm Kollel at REITs. Rabbi Fagin studied at Yeshiva HaKotel under Rabbi Reuven Tarragon, Yeshiva Itri under Rabbi Ari of HaEzer, and Yeshiva University under Rav Eli Shulman. In Smicha, he studied under Rabbi Aryeh Leibowitz. Rabbi Fagin holds a master's degree in Jewish studies from the Revel Graduate School and currently serves as Mashgiach Ruchani in Yeshiva's Night Seder program, as well as program administrator in the undergraduate Torah Studies division at Yeshiva University. Rabbi Fagin is presently a member of the Yad and Kollel and is also pursuing a PhD in Jewish studies at Torah University. He's actively engaged in curriculum development for the forthcoming REITs Master's Program in Business Halacha. In the past, he has served as a Shir Rebbe in YU's Post-Pesach program and as a Gemara bootcamp instructor. Today's Chaburah will address the topic Ruach Ra, the status of depression in Halacha, as it pertains to divorce law. With that, I turn the program over to Rabbi Fagin.
Thank you. Pretty easy.
Okay, shkoyach. As was mentioned, the Chaburah I want to give today is on the topic of Ruach Ra, the topic of specifically depression and its place in the interplay between halacha and mental health. As far as I've seen, the entire conversation regarding mental health and where and halacha has been predicated on a simple but unmoving tenet that there is a single potential halachic definition that we could potentially try to make commensurate with modern mental health diagnoses. The question is, in most tshuvas, and has always been, again, as far as I've seen, is whether the spoken about mental ailment could and should achieve the status of a shota, and therefore have the halachic ramifications of a shota. The one barometer for the halachic ramifications for mental health has been whether it fits this definition of a shota. Therefore, many poskim have been interested in trying to figure out exactly what the exact definition of a shota is, and then have tried to apply that definition to more modern definitions and more modern diagnoses, psychiatric diagnoses. In other words, the focus of most Torah regarding the definitions of a shota have focused on the Gemara in Chagiga, which speaks about the idea, and therefore focused on the definition of what a sota is. And then once I could understand what is considered to be within the confines of a shota, so then I will be able to figure out whether or not this particular diagnosis fits into that definition of a shota. And most Sfarim that I was able to look at on the topic of mental health, also they follow that formula. The newest ones like Nafshi B'Sheila, see that I saw multiple periodicals. All of them are all trying to figure out how can I define shota? What are the different ways that people can define shota? And then whether we can say a specific diagnosis fits within that. For today, I'm only going to refer to poskim that seem to be it's hard to put modern definitions on different things that are in tshuvas, but that seem to be specifically trying to deal with the question of minor depression, of meaning people with depression that don't have suicidal tendencies, people who have trouble getting out of bed, have trouble functioning, have trouble having a regular schedule, and that's it as far as their usually sometimes have bad appetites, but that's as far as their symptoms go. I chose this because there are certain nosei kelim on in Hilchos Gittin that speak about specifically this, and by doing this, by isolating it specifically to this area, so it should, in theory, exclude almost all tshuvos regarding the get of cleaves and all the different famous tshuvos regarding shota on this topic, because if it seems like from those tshuvos that was much more similar to or akin to the modern schizophrenic, as opposed to someone with the classical case and very common case of just simple depression.
I mean, depression can have psychotic features also.
For sure, yeah. I'm talking about the most basic level. That's something that I hope to get to. That it's that obviously depression could progress, but I'm not talking about past the progression. I'm talking about the most basic level. As we'll see, though, one of the issues of this sugya, and I think that there are a couple, is first of all that it's enormous. There's a lot on it. Second of all, there are really three hurdles that need to be overcome when looking at the halachic literature in this area. The first is that it seems like that many of the poskim and many of the tshuvos, they speak about let's say depression, let's say mara shchora, in the context of other seemingly other types of mental health diseases, right? So, for example, the Pesrei Tshuva, where in Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph, so when he's trying to figure out whether or not, and this is just an example, almost everyone does this, when he's trying to figure out whether someone with mara shchora, which sounds like some type of minor depression, from the Pesrei Tshuva, we'll get back to that later as well, but he brings the Sfarim that are classic to that the classical Sfarim on the get of cleaves and all of those different tshuvas, in order to try to prove whether mara shchora should be included in the definition of a shota, and so because of that, it becomes very confusing if you're trying to sift out for a single diagnosis, to try to figure out what the halacha is in a specific case. So that's one hurdle that I think is important to point out. A second hurdle that's important to point out is that there seems to be in many of the poskim a disconnect between the definition of ruach ra and of melancholy melancholy, right? Those two things. I'll give an example of that. Ruach ra, which is the topic of the shir. So the Rambam in the Parish of Mishnayos, he speaks about what the definition of ruach ra is, and he says that korin l'chol mini melancholit v'yesh mehen min shachol boreach v'yotzi migidro kishu roa or kishu nimtza ben bnei adam v'yimtza nachas ruach v'tishkot nafsho b'choshech uvdidus uv'mkomos hashomimim. Basically, the most low degree case of depression. And that's how the Rambam defines ruach ra. And he does that not just there, he does that in a couple of places throughout the Parish of Mishnayos. He does that in Avos in a similar way. He does that in Bechoros. He does it in Erevin, in all these different places where he has this same basic definition of ruach ra. But if you look, let's say, at the Aruch HaShulchan, on Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph. So he speaks about Baalei Marei Shchora, Shein Osim Klum Dvarim Shel Shigaon, Rak Yoshvin Ba'atzvos V'Rechokim Michaburas Anashim, Ve'in Mevakshim Lechol, Ukishenosim Lahem Lechol Ochlin, Ve'in Matchilin Ledaber, Kushishol Linoso Onin Ma'at Dvarim, Ve'in Midabrim Dvarim Shel Shigaon. So the question is, Yesh Yesh Lehis Yashiv Im Dinam Kishota Im Lav. Right, so the Aruch HaShulchan paskins that it is not considered a part of the definition of shota. It's just atzvos, and therefore he is lenient. The Piskei Tshuva that I quoted before quotes poskim that are machmir. But the point that I want to try to show from this Aruch HaShulchan is l'chora. It's mefurish in the Shulchan Aruch. Right, the Shulchan Aruch says the case of ruach ra. Right, in Kochaf Aleph, in the first halacha, it says Lefikach Im achzu ruach ra b'shash shemitzavel kosvo ein kosveno so afilu l'kishiyavri. Right, so it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect between the definition of ruach ra and melancholy, especially when the Rambam seems to define it so clearly. So that I think is a second hurdle that needs to be overcome. A third hurdle that needs to be overcome is that very basic hanacha that I started with, that almost every tshuva on the topic and every book that I've read that I was able to see on this always are just trying to figure out that question. Is it bechlal shota? Meaning that's the only thing that I have to figure out. Is it bechlal shota or is it not bechlal shota? That's the only thing that's important, because if it's not bechlal shota, so then it's irrelevant basically in halacha. And if it is bechlal shota, then it's relevant in halacha. So I therefore want to start by analyzing the shita of the Rambam regarding ruach ra, regarding melancholy, which is what depression was called in the time of the Rambam, from what I was able to gather from some of his medical writings and from some other places, and from what he wrote in the Perush and Mishnayos, and see what his shita is on this idea of ruach ra. So, that's what the Rambam, that's what the Rambam seemed to say in Perush and Mishnayos. Yes. Any questions so far before we start the? Oh, good. So we'll get to the Gemara later on. So the Rambam, just to address your point, and then we'll come back to it a lot later. But just to address your point, when the Rambam brings down this Mishnah, he says Misha Haiso Ruach Ra Miva'etes Oso. Right. So the Rambam is clearly equating kordaikis, right, which is what the Mishnah says, and ruach ra. So for our purposes, because we're going to be looking at the Rambam, for our purposes, we're going to say that kordaikis is ruach ra, even though it's true that lav dafka, according to all Rishonim, is it ruach ra. But for the Rambam, it's pashut that it is. Good. So maybe just to start with some really diagarta, there's a fascinating letter written by the Rambam to Rav Yefes Adayan, and so in that letter, it's a fascinating letter for many reasons, both about halachic reasons as well. Like for example, the Rambam's shita on aliyah laharabayis. This letter has ramifications for that question. This letter has ramifications for the question of being misabel yoser midai, which will become obvious for reasons that we're about to see. But Lamaisa, it's a very important letter, and it's also a very powerful letter. You see the emotion of the Rambam, so I thought that it was very powerful. Basically, this Rav Yefes Adayan, went and he wrote a letter to the Rambam, basically saying, "Why haven't you reached out to me? I haven't heard from you in a very long time, and so I'm upset that you haven't reached out to me." And so this is the Rambam's response. So the Rambam says, I'll start at Ve'od, which is 3 lines in mine at the beginning of the first line. He says, Ve'od, shemei achar shenifradnu b'chadashim ma'atim mes abba mori. Right, my father died very soon after I left Eretz Yisrael. Ubo kisvei atanchumim miktzei ma'arev ve'eretz Edom mimahalav kamer chadashim v'atalo samta libchol azos. You never sent me a letter of condolences for my father's death. Gam iruli tsaros rabos gluyos be'eretz Mitzrayim, mechalayim ve'hefsid mamim ve'amidas mosarim alai lahargeni. And all of these terrible tsaros happened to me. You never tell you, and these were meforsim l'chora, and you never reached out to hear about any of these things. And then he says, Ve'hara hagedola sheba alai ba'achrona, and the worst thing that possibly happened to me, she'ira mikol ra she'avra alai miyom heyosi v'arayom hazeh, the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, v'hi petiras hatzadik, that is the death. The tzaddik is his brother, shetava b'yom hodu, that drowned in the Indian Ocean, uviyado mamon ravli v'lo v'la'acherim, v'iniach bas ketanav al manaso etzli, v'nisharti acharav k'moshana miyom shigia hashmua hara, nofel alamita b'shchinra, uvidalekes uvisimon levav. Right?
It wasn't Rama's brother's sole or major means of financial support.
Yes. So that's what he's about to say. But right before that, this line is a pella. Right? The Rambam was bedridden for a year, b'shchinra with some type of boils, but dalekis with fever. V'simon levav, there are some translations that say that that's marash chora, but v'simon levav is some form of depression. And obviously, we're not putting the Rambam on a psychologist's couch. But Lamaisa, like whatever the Rambam had, it was certainly bad. It wasn't regular depression, right? There were certainly other symptoms, but it's just a fascinating thing. And then he says, "Ukemat kad hayisi ovid." I was about to perish from this. And until now, I for 8 years, I still haven't had any nechama. I still haven't had any salis. Why would I be able to get salis? Ben, he was like a son to me. Al birkai gadal. He grew up on my lap. V'huaya ach, and he was a brother. V'hua talmid, and he was my talmid. V'hushaya nosei v'nosein b'shuk umarviach v'ani yoshev lebetach, right, which is what you said, that he supported me. Ve'heven b'talmid mehera, ve'heven b'duktu kaloshen yoser, ve'lo haisali simcha elo birosa. That's what the Rambam says. He says, Arva kol simcha v'halech l'chayei olam, v'henichani nivhal be'eretz nochriya, kol es she'erek sav yado o sefer misfarav, ye pachalai libi v'yeoro yigonai, klolo shel davar, ki ered al bnei evel sheula, I think that's the pasuk, v'lulei haTorah hishashuai v'divrei hachachma she'eshkach behen yigonai, azavariti be'oni. Right, that's the letter. So I thought it was a fascinating letter that about the Rambam. Yeah. So it was, so I thought that was a fascinating letter. So just to start off with that idea, but now the halacha. So the
that letter is usually written in Arabic.
yes, it's in Arabic, yeah, or Judeo-Arabic, yeah. So good. So now let's do the halacha. So let's see the sources. The main source on this is the Rambam in Hilchos Gerushin in Parak Beis Halacha Yud Daled, where he says Misha HaEzer ruach ra mevaetes oso ve'amar kishehizchil bo hacholi kisvu get leishti lo amar klum mipnei she'ein daito nechono miyusheves. That if someone has ruach ra, so they can't write a get. V'chein hashikr she'igil l'shachruso shalot v'im lo higil harei zeh safek. And the same thing goes for a shikr who reaches a certain level of drunkenness, which is not our topic for today. One more halacha, and he says, Amar kishu bari kisvu get v'tnu leishti v'achar kach niva'as mamtinin ad sheyavri v'kosvim v'nosten la ve'in tzarich lachzor ulihi malech bo achar shehivri v'im kosvu v'nosnu kodem sheyavri harei zeh pasol. So there are a bunch of questions that I want to try to raise on these Rambams and a few others. The first, I'm going to skip the Beis Yosef. Yeah, so it's a good question. On page, I'll tell you on yours. On Rebbe's, on page, let's see if we have it here. Yeah, on page 6 in the I wasn't sure if I was going to get to this, but on page 6. So the Rambam in the Parish of Mishnayos in Bechoros speaks about what the Mishnah in Bechoros says, V'ruach kitzaris, and he says over there, he says, Mitotzos hamara shchora ki mivulvale hachushim ve'hamishuamim mamim shekvar hiviasam his gavros hamara shchora lidei sheposad pu'ulos haguf ve'kolchosav. So Marash Chora in the Rambam, I think is depression. But the point that the Rambam is making here, that it went even a step further, meaning that it progressed. That if Rebbe looks on page 7, that's the diuk that the Malbusha Yantiv makes in this Parasha Mishnah. He says that there's 2 different levels of Marash Chora. There's Marash Chora, which is the first level, which is classical depression according to the Malbusha Yantiv, and then there's the progressions that happen, which is what the Rambam is referring to which is what the Rambam is referring to in the Parasha Mishnah. So if you so what does that have to do with anything? Good question. So if you look in the Rambam in Hilchos, where is it in this packet? In Hilchos, it's on the bottom of page 4 in Hilchos Bias HaMikdash Perek Ches. So he says, when he quotes that halacha, so he says ve'od yesham be'adam arba mumin acherim ve'eluhen hacheresh hashote ve'anichba afilu liyamim rabim mi sheruach ra mivataso tamid o be'itim yuduim. Right. So the Rambam, when he's speaking about ruach kitzaris, so he uses this same lashon of ruach ra miva'etes. So I assume, I'm not 100% sure, but I assume that when he says miva'etes, so he's referring to a similar thing that what he means in Hilchos Bias HaMikdash, and so therefore it would be what he says in the Parasha Mishnayos. Yeah.
So the Megillah is Haman suffering from depression.
Sorry.
It says Haman Nevat.
Right. So it's trembling, right? But it sounds like what the Rambam means by trembling, meaning it's got into a stage which is worse. There's another potential explanation that the Rambam in the Parasha Mishnayos in Gittin says that it's some type of seizure, right? So miva'etes is shaking, so someone suggests that those are the same. But Lamaisa, what I thought that the Rambam meant, and this could be wrong, but what I thought that the Rambam meant is that it's a serious case of ruach ra.
Yeah, but if there's a seizure activity as part of depression,
Yeah. So I'm not.
Then it's intelligent.
Yeah.
Call it organic mood or secondary.
Yeah, I'm not.
Disorder.
I'm not saying. I hear. I was just saying that there are other opinions out there of what exactly it is. I agree. I'm not sure that's pshat in what the Rambam is saying. But Lamaisa, I thought that that's what ruach ra meant. But also I think hopefully through the rest, hopefully it'll be able to become more clear as well. So I want to skip the Beis Yosef for now, and go to the Kesef Mishnah. So this is the question that many of the poskim and the achronim deal with. That's the question of the Kesef Mishnah. The Beis Yosef asks it again as well in Kof Chaf Aleph. That's the question of why the Rambam seems to hold that this is only a psol d'Rabbanan, because we know that lechora a shota doesn't have das. A shota is a psol d'oraisa lechora by Gittin. And so, because of that, so it's very strange that the Rambam holds that this is only a psul d'Rabbanan. The Kesef Mishnah says that it's Yadua in the Rambam that whenever he says HaEzer pasul, so he means that it's a pasul mid'Rabbanan, as opposed to saying Eino get where it's not good d'Oraisa. So he's medayik in Halacha Tesvav where it says HaEzer pasul. The Rambam holds that it's really d'Rabbanan, and l'chora it should be d'Oraisa. If we know that ruach ra is a type of shota, so l'chora it should be d'Oraisa. So that the Kesef Mishnah, to the best of my knowledge, does not answer. So that's one question that I want to try to address. It actually seems like there's a piece missing from the Kesef Mishnah. It could be in that he answers it. Question number 2. There's another question that some of the Achronim ask on these Rambams, and that goes back on what we just read, where the Rambam says that the reason why it's not a good get by someone with ruach ra is because mipnei she'ein daito nechona umiyusheves. And so a lot of the Achronim try to ask. I don't understand in Hilchos Edus, where the Rambam also speaks about shota and also speaks about why a shota would be excluded from certain things. So the lashon of the Rambam is hashota pasul le'edus min haTorah lefi she'eino ben mitzvos. Right, so the kasha that many of the Achronim bring up is, why does the Rambam need that extra reason? Right, seemingly it would suffice to just have the reason that we have in Hilchos Gerushin? That's another question that the Achronim ask. Another couple of questions. The Rambam in Halacha Tes Zayin is interesting for a couple of different reasons. One is that the Rambam first he introduces this new lashon that he didn't use up until this point when discussing someone with ruach ra, meaning this type of psul when it comes to gittin. He says mishin ishtatek v'aredaito nachona v'chule v'chule. So first he says bot keno shlosha pamim. So first of all, he never said that by ruach ra, right? This is new for the nishtatek. But ve'od, if you continue, he says im amar al lav lav al hin hin harei yolichtu v'yitnu v'tzrichim levod ko yafa yafa shema nitrafa daito. Right, there's a new lashon that now the Rambam is using called Shema Nitrafa Daito. He never uses that when it came to Ruach Ra. He's only using that when it comes to Nishtatek. And then it gets even weirder because then he goes back. V'chein im kosav biyado kisvu v'tnu getli ishti harei lukos v'nosen la im haisa daito miyusheves alav. Right, so and then he says she'endi nishtatek kedin ha'cheresh. Right, so two questions on this Rambam. One, right, what's this new lashon of Shema Nitrafa Daito? L'chora, I would have been consistent the entire time. I should have said Shema in Daito miyusheves alav. And two, then the Rambam goes back and says Daito miyusheves alav. It's another couple of questions. Another question. Sorry, yeah.
The opposite of daito miyusheves is nitzvah daito.
Why antonyms?
One's the opposite of the other.
Im haiso daito miyusheves alav, meaning
It's not nitzvah daito anymore. Nitzvah daito is crazy, whatever that means. Miyusheves means not crazy.
so why wouldn't he say im haisa daito im ein daito nitrafa? No,
Double negative.
im ein daito. So it's just for clarity. I hear. It could be.
mean,
I hear.
it's I understand the word nishtatkut means nonverbal, and sometimes with depression you're so severely withdrawn that you're such nonverbal, then you have to prove the cognitive status.
Could be. I interpreted this as something different than ruach ra, but I
How
hear
do you translate the word nishtatkut? Is that
someone who's
Nonverbal.
actively right, but that doesn't mean that he has the symptoms. It doesn't mean that he has the other symptoms of depression. It doesn't mean that he's lying in bed. It doesn't mean that he's not eating. It doesn't mean any of those things.
That's true, but Lamaisa, most people with depression who are nonverbal are probably lying in bed.
What? Non-verbal is perfectly normal.
Yeah,
Some people are just quiet.
Cold time is deeper.
well, I understand, but that's what for once you're nonverbal, it begs the question of how to detect. That's why you have to ask them to the question.
Okay, interesting. I didn't read it that way. I'm not sure.
Particularly,
That's not your fault.
particularly if it's a marked change in status.
What?
Particularly if it's a marked change in status. That's the point. If
You're talking psychiatric terms.
well, that's what I'm trying to make sense of it too. Do it the best way I can understand.
So anyways, I hear it's possible that there's no diuk here. I'm very masking to that. Yeah, I hear. Another question that I want to discuss is the Rambam in Hilchos Shchita. The Rambam in Hilchos Shchita says, he says, Lefikach, Cheresh, O Shota, O Katan, O Shikir, Shinizbalbula Daito, O Mi Sheachzaso Ruach Ra, Sheshachto Ve'achirim Roenosan, Sheashchita Ketikna, HaEzer Kishera. Right? He says that all these different categories, they're all it sounds like that if there's someone that's watching them and making sure that it's a good shchita, because shchita doesn't require kavana, so therefore it's going to be completely permissible. It's going to be completely kosher. So it's interesting though that later in Hilchos Shchita that the Rambam says with pretty much the same exact halacha. He says cheresh shota v'katan v'shikr shenizbalbala daito sheshachto shchitasam psula mipnei she'ein bahen das shema yil kalkulu. Lefikach hem shachtu b'fnei hayodea v'rosan sheshachtu kehugan shchitasan kshera. The shaila is he left one out, right? He left out ruach ra. Ruach ra is not there, and I wasn't sure if that one was a kasha either.
No, but he did not say
Yeah, that also. Yeah, that's not. I hear.
It should do the same line.
Right. Yeah, I hear. So yeah, I hear. Meaning the comparison between shikr is inconsistent in different cases in the Rambam. And I'm not sure. I didn't look into that. Meaning in some places when he mentions ruach ra, he mentions shota, he speaks about just a shikr, and that hasn't gotten to the place of shakrus or shalo. And then in other places he equates it to just a regular shikr. But Lamaisa, so I looked in the back of the Frankel if anyone asked this, and Taka, someone made the diuk. So the Knesset Hagadola in Yardei Siman Aleph, he makes the same diuk. So that's one of the questions as well. Where why does the Rambam here leave out ruach ra? And finally, the last question. This is really this one I'm not particularly bothered by, but Lamaisa, it's just another halacha in Hilchos Gerushin where shota comes up, but similar to Hilchos Shchita, the concept of a ruach ra doesn't come up, and that's in Hilchos. It comes up a couple of times also in Perek Yud in Hilchos Gerushin, but also in Perek Gimel about ksivas hageh, that it's mashma from the Rambam that someone with unless shota is the same as ruach ra, and then it's not true. But it's mashma. The Rambam never mentions ruach ra over here. That's another ha'ara. So. So again, just to go over some of the questions very quickly. One, why does the Rambam think that it's derabanan? Two, why does the Rambam give different reasons for why a shota is excluded from something in different places? Three, in Halacha Tes Zayin, we have this idea of Shemin Nitrifa Daito and Daito Miyushavas Alav. Maybe those are antonyms. Then we also have this idea of Bot Kenoso Shlosha Palmim, which didn't come up by Ruach Ra. We had another question about Hilchos Shchita, that sometimes he mentions Ruach Ra, sometimes he doesn't mention Ruach Ra. And we have in Hilchos Gerushin, right, that also there are some times where he speaks about this concept called Ruach Ra, and then there are other times where he speaks about Shota, it's just the Stam Shota. So I think that there's really one yesod that I think could answer all of these questions. I think it would help clarify a lot of the different particulars and intricacies of these types of halachos. So yesh la'ayin bidavar, to paint very broad strokes. The problem with a shota, he's not b'chlal mitzvos. The problem with a shota is that there is a chisaron in his das. Right, there is some type of chisaron in his das. Is that the same by someone with ruach ra? By ruach ra, like someone with depression and he's in bed. So, does he not have das? Is he not able to think in the same way? Not able to meaning, is there a chisaron in his das?
Well, cognitive slowing. Not qualitative impairment.
Right.
Judgment and comprehension.
Right. That, meaning he could comprehend everything exactly the same. It might be a little bit slower, right? But at the end of the day, it's not I don't know if what his chisaron is that he doesn't have the same level of das. I think it's much closer to what the Rambam says the chisaron was when he speaks about ruach ra. It's mipnei she'en daito miyusheves alav. Miyusheves alav doesn't mean that he has a chisaron in das. It's that his das is not miyushav. There's no yishuv hadas. Why?
He's unsettled because he's preoccupied. But if you're able to focus him, perhaps he can be logical.
He can't think rationally. He thinks,
Well, I think he could think rationally. It's just that he's blocked by other things. Meaning he can't get out of bed.
But if you were somehow locked, they talk about these things in everything. You have all the capacity, everything is working, so it's locked up in the side. Hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
I can take a drug. It helps me think very rationally, very clearly, and I stop taking the drug. As long as I take the drug, it's like you show us a little. I'm normal like everybody else. I solve quadratic equations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take the drug, so my IQ falls to 30.
But so I don't think does someone's IQ change when they have depression? I don't think so.
I don't think depression is a shirt. I don't think it even comes into the economy. but the depression can progress to become a shaykhis. But the nafkamin is not whether I feel bad or don't feel bad. It's whether I can solve quadratic equations or whatever the level of mathematics we expect a shaykh to be able to master.
So
I don't know. This is your thing.
no, I hear. I think that's fair. I think though that if that well, let's continue. And I hear.
So why is it separate categories?
Oh.
Why does the Rambam have a separate
Right.
category?
The Rambam. That's what.
He's defining the psychiatrist. He's defining this way.
And there's two.
But there's two. That's what I'm about to get to. There are two examples.
Only he'll say this is different.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying. I hear. Sorry. Yeah. I'm not referring to Eidos. The Rambam in two places when he's defining categories of shtus, so he categorizes shota different than ruach ra. Meaning those are two completely separate categories. One is called a shota, and one is ruach ra.
Maybe he's saying that ruach ra is b'chol shayta. Well, I don't have to repeat it every time you use the word shayta. I tell you once, and now you'll know that shayta Esther is going to bottom, but includes ruach ra. Ruach ra is a form of shtus. That's the threshold level of shtus.
Meaning, and then just twice when he says both. Meaning there are times here in Hilchos Shchita he says lefikach cheresh o shota o katan o shikr shenizbabel adaito umi she'achzaso ruach ra. Right, that's one time where he separates it, and then another time in Bias HaMikdash where he's.
And he threw in there also shikr who's not going to be a shikr because that's not necessarily a lot of the shayta.
I agree. Yeah, they're not. Those aren't
So you have to take them out of.
No, that's my.
Using consistent terminology.
No. That's my point. That it's not bechlal shota. It's a different category. That's exactly my point. It's not bechlal shota. What? No. So there's another place where the Rambam says it. The Rambam says it in Bias HaMikdash when he's speaking about mumin about a kohen. So he says the same thing. He's speaking about different mumin, and he counts 4 different mumin. So he says 1 hacheresh hashota.
You're right.
Thank you.
Right. That's a move. So that means the shayta.
No, that's goof on my point. It's not a shota. It's a different category. It's a different shame. It's a different holy. Ruach ra is not a shota. It has a shame bifnei atzmo. It's a holy bifnei atzmo, and it has therefore different parameters bifnei atzmo. I don't have to define it about whether it's a shota. Shota has a different question. It's a question in Chagiga. It's a question, all the different questions of how exactly Helchos Eidos, all the different questions of how I'm supposed to define a shota. Ruach ra has it's a different type of holy, and therefore it has different parameters. The parameters of whether your das is miyushevas alav. It's a chola. It could be a chola sheyesh bo sakana, like we see in Shabbos and Bamei Madlikin. It could be a chola sheyesh bo sakana, which is the lashon of the Rambam in the Perush HaMishnayos. It could be a chola sheyesh bo sakana, or it could be a chola she'en bo sakana. But that's not a shota.
This was Parsh Yaakov even for as long as he doesn't know Yosef is. That's what I translated in Shabbos. Shabbos, somebody's unsettled. All Yaakov could think about was Yosef. The point is, Yehuda left the house and the whole family fell apart. He wasn't a shaita, but he was so focused and so preoccupied. And if you really be able to refocus him, maybe he could have solved very wise quadratic equations. However, everybody wasn't focused; only focused exclusively on where's Yosef.
So my point just is, I agree, it's not a shota, but that doesn't mean that it's not a choli, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have halachic ramifications. And I'll get to those nafkaminas in a little bit, but first I just want to speak about why I think that answers all the terutzim. So let's go through them. First of all, just before we get to that, there's a fascinating read of the Divrei Malkiel in Chagiga, when the Gemara is trying to figure out what the definition of a shota is, and whether halon bebeis hakvaros by itself is going to be considered, whether that's going to be considered a shota. So the Divrei Malkiel explains that the Shaklavataria there is all about whether we should make the chazaka that the person is a shota, meaning do we have enough, he did it, so we have a machaneh mishutaf in order to tell us that he's becheskas shota, or is it telling us that no, he's becheskas amara shchora? Right, which the point, or one of the other maras. But the point is that you see from this Gemara, right, that was the question. The question was that there's one thing he's not speaking about ruach ra here. But lemaisa, there's one thing that we call marach shchora that we're talking about with depression, something like that. And then there's something else. It's a different category. It has different halachic ramifications called a shota. And I think with this, we answer all of our kashas. The Kesef Mishnah asks, how could it be that this would be derabanan? Right? Why would it be derabanan? After all, shota is daraisa. The answer is this is not shota. A shota has a psul daraisa when it comes to get. It's a different category. It's ruach ra. It has different concerns, and it's not as much of a chisaron in das because it's a chisaron in yishuv das, which is what the Bach says. The Bach, which is the last source on the thing, he says that it's not a kasha of the Kesef Mishnah because delo kamar talmuda. No, I'm sorry, that's for something else. So I'll get to that soon. But lamaisa, if you look at that same Bach, he says this. He says it's not a shota. So why is it a problem to say that it's derabanan? The second question that we asked. The second question that we asked about. I just want to go in order. The second question that we asked about from Hilchos Eidos. The Rambam gives different reasons in Hilchos Eidos where he speaks about a shota lefisha eno ben mitzvos, and here that it's eno daitom yushavas alav. What's pshat? How could that be? The Even HaEzer answers it's pashut by. One has nothing to do with shota. It's something else. It's a different psul. It's a different type of holy. We'll speak about the next one in a little bit about halacha tes zayin. I'll get back to that soon. But also the bedika of hein lav lav is not shaykh by ruach ra. Right? We said that the only time where that came up was by nishtatek. It's not shaykh by ruach ra. Ruach ra has das. He'll get all of those questions correct. That's not a geder of whether or not that person has ruach ra. Because at the end of the day, that bedika, which is what all of the poskim say, they say he answers all of the questions correctly when he has melancholy. He's able to answer all of the questions that we ask in order to see whether he's a shota. It's just that he has depression. Yeah, but so it's not a good test. Hey, those bedikas are not a good test, but that doesn't preclude the fact that someone might have ruach ra. Next. I'll read the Knesset Hagadola. The Knesset Hagadola is the one that asks the kasha. He says, "V'nearly ledaktek midivrei Rambam desfirle demishach zaso ruach ra ino shochid lechachila beino levein atzmo." He's a big chiddush la'alacha. He says that it's true that all of those people that they mentioned, you're not allowed to shecht unless someone else is there, unless someone else is with you. But he says that when it comes to ruach ra, so if someone is not with someone with ruach ra, b'di'evet it's kosher. So he says, and I think that's pshat in the Rambam. He says, "Avalim shachat shchita so kishera b'di'evet. Afal pisha enachem roin oso sheshachat shchita kitikuna. Shebeperik Beis, I think that should be Perik Dalid. Should be Perik whatever mehilchos shchita kasav lefika cher shot v'katan umishach zaso ruach ra uveperik Dalid kasav cher shot v'katan." And he doesn't speak about ruach ra. What's pshat? V'yesh la'ayin lama lo kasav v'perik Dalid mishach zaso ruach ra kimoshe kasav v'perik Beis. Demayir d'shchita san kshera kisha cherin roin osam klal ima hem mishach zaso ruach ra lomar de'af hu lo yishchol lechachila. Also he can't do it by himself. Lechatchila aval beperek dalid d'shchita sam psula kamar. So lo kollel imahem achzaso ruach ra mipnei shemisha achzaso ruach ra afilu shachat bein levein atzmo shchitaso kishera b'di'eved ve'efshar mizeh hatam hishmitu aposkim misha achzaso ruach ra. But then he asks a kasha. Then he says umihu. Nehi sheyesh ledakte ken mitoch harambam mikol makom ein hasvara mechayeves ken de'achzaso ruach ra be'osa shah harei hu kishota v'lama tiyeh shchitaso kshera kisheshachat ve'ein acherem omer al gabav. But according to what we're saying, there's no kasha. There's no kasha of this Knesset Hagadola because it's not a shota. It's a different holy.
Those are both black and yishuv v'das.
Korkodikis is probably
Just no yishuv v'das. Yes, v'das.
Korkodikis is probably alcohol related delirium because it says very clearly in the Gemara there that it's a shade related to alcohol.
Shechrus Shlosh is not black and yishuv v'das.
So
delirious
Ram says
state,
v'chein.
but even if
yeah,
you
so
delirious state, you definitely have trips of us.
So-
Less than yishuv v'das. You don't have that. Shechrus Shlosh didn't have that.
No,
Yeah.
you don't have to. some people are so vulnerable to intake of alcohol that in the most delirious
So-
state, even they haven't consumed a great deal.
Your biggest raya is the Rambam in Sirah Sadeh. Irish and
Yes. Oh, I'm getting to that. Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, no, I would love it. I would love it. Yeah, please. No, I'd love to be mechaven. Yeah.
The Rambam in Saxon is the shul, it's called a shayt. And then there's another kind of a shayt that depends upon whether he has a claw. Can he think or can't he think? You have to give me a shayt, a person who's a cipher, knows how to write properly. There's no problem with this crazy. It's a lunatic. It's not good shayt.
Right.
But for see if we get,
Wait.
see if we have Baal.
Wait, is a lunatic not shaita? Feels quite. What do we mean? He's a lunatic not shaita?
I should use the word lunatic. He's cracked. He has
misbehaviors
knows
that are
enough
not
how
the
to-
qualifications of halachic shota.
Yeah, the technical.
It's a raya, no? Right. Okay. Yeah.
Whenever you need the guy to have some kind of active form of God, I think you share this all over the criterion. When you're talking about a psul haguf, it's all a shayt.
Yeah. Sorry. Wait.
It's two you
So-
can go inside.
Right. So I want to. I hear. I thought about that a lot. I thought about that. Lamaisa, again, I didn't look into the Rambam Shita on that just because there's a lot of steers that I wasn't able to get to. But Lamaisa, what I think in Daitum Yushavas Alav means is that you have no koach ha'avchana. Meaning it's a lack of being able to make proper choices. And that's what shikr b'shichrus shalom.
Why not use the word logical, rational?
What?
Why not use the word rational?
Rational choices. I hear.
This is less than so a shaker, no?
What?
A shaker's not making irrational decisions.
I think he is. I think that's what a shikr does. What?
Crucial shalot's not closer.
Life probably can write again.
Well, poor judgment. Poor judgment is not the same as irrational.
Closer to shota.
It might be immature logic.
Right. So that's why I don't want to. That's why I didn't want to get into it because Lamaisa, the Rambam doesn't say it by ksivas aget shichrus shalom. So I'm not exactly sure how to categorize it, especially when he equates it in other places. But the way that I understood that Rambam is that that dafka shechrus shalot is that he didn't have koach havchana. He made really bad decisions. Lot made really bad decisions.
Why not say the reverse?
What?
Why not say the reverse?
Which is
That's b'chlal, the statutory shayt. Yehi shikrus shalit is called a shayt. Yehi shikrus shalit isn't called a
No,
shayt.
but then ruach
no, but then ruach. But then what's the v'chein? There's a v'chein in the Rambam.
That means ruach is a shota. So then ruach is a shota. So then he's trying to say that.
Another way to formulate
It's
it.
kasha.
No, so
Another way to formulate it, you could explain that ruach may not be a statutory shota, but it may share elements of the tour that a shota will have.
Yeah,
Right, that would be
for sure.
And that's what you're saying.
yeah.
It's a
Meaning,
separate category that will have, like a Venn diagram, many of its overlapping paturim will overlap with shota.
That would be true like it.
I'm sorry.
The Venn diagrams addresses that.
Right, exactly.
right, exactly.
Shota and ruach would be closer to something else.
Shikrus shalit
Wouldn't be
is
the same.
statutory shayt.
The tour would be different.
It might depend on what subject you're talking about, as Rabbi Black pointed out, right? And potentially how granular you want to look at the halacha.
Right, so that's why I'm a supuk about that. But Lamaisa, I think that the v'chein is not so problematic. But to get to what Rabbi was saying about there potentially being different levels of ruach ra, I think that's true. And I think but when we reach that higher level, so most of the time in the Rambam that's referred to as marashchara, meaning the higher level is this thing called marashchara. But I definitely agree to what Rabbi is saying that there are different levels of ruach.
The other way around.
So-
Morris Square is the lower level, and it gets so bad, so same time you shut it
So there.
Close to Morris Square.
So I saw some other achronim that said that, but Maisa, I thought that it was meduik in the Rambam, in the Parashah Mishnayos that I quoted before from Bechoros, that there are certain types there that Marash Chora is much more extensive. The Ode,
Shayt is statutory, don't talk about it, like a favorite. And then there's Ruach Ra Vaso, so it's all. Ruach Ra makes me confused, I can't think clearly, I'm not rational, that's lower. But that's also called a mum, that's called the shayt, the mum of shayt, whatever it is.
a mum of Shota, if what?
Ruach Roma Vasosa. Ruach Roma Vasosa means I'm totally confused. That may not be statutory. What's the difference? Well, in terms of the halacha, it's all the same. The shayta sub one and shayta sub two.
Okay. I'm happy to say shota sub one, no, shota
I
sub.
think this one is just that Mevetis has to be a higher darga.
What?
Mevetis has to be a higher level of.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is.
Closer to
Right.
Shalom.
Okay. I hear. So you don't have to. Yeah, I hear. But it's yes.
Right, there
Good.
might be a version
It's
of Ruach that's not Shtos.
Does he ever
Right.
use the word Ruach Roma in the Mishnah?
yeah. Those times that
But that all of these.
without mivayatas, Rabbi saying
Without knowledge.
in Hilchos Shchita.
Yeah, there's different.
Shabbos.
In the street, it's certainly different. He's not talking about street. He's talking about what's going to passel him the street because he doesn't. It's getting. He doesn't know. It's a dexterity. He has no dexterity.
The Chaburah recites in Halacha and in Shulchan Aruch called it Imun Yadav. Right? The Ruach creates a lack of Imun Yadav. And that's why the Chaburah lumps it into all of the Shota, because any type of lack of Daiz and Shota
Yeah, that's a different halacha, different gather, just like the same.
So okay. I hear. Lamaisa, it's getting a little long. So Lamaisa, I thought that based off of all this, we don't have to go through the other stuff. Lamaisa, there's work to do on the Gemara to make sure that that because Rabbi Yochanan says that he's medamet to shota, right? So there's right. So
That's the real,
what?
yeah, that's the real problem.
Oh, okay. So I guess we will do. I found the nachron on the Gemara that explains based off of this mamish this idea. He says shari mizugya didan mevuar the Yad David. He says shari mizugya didan mevuar didami l'shota uveshota vaday afilu benises tetzeh v'harbe tirchu achronim liyashiv dvarav. He says l'fli pshutan shel dvarim nira ki harambam kasav ruach ra v'yadua ki harambam mefaresh ki hu choli hamalin kalia k'moshe kasav beferish parak b'amel malikim gabe mipnei ruach ra v'savar harambam ki vaday in ze bechlal shotim ki yadua ki kama mehem birov ha'itim hem baalei seichel kishar ha'anashim v'chein mashma sham b'rambam beferish ha'mishnayos v'rak safiku ulefikach pasach harambam mipnei ha'safik ki hu so pasal v'im niseis lo tetzeh. So he mamish deals with this exact point on the Gemara, and the Maisa it solves other problems on the Gemara also.
Who is that from you just quoted?
The Yad David.
Yeah.
Page 8.
And the Bach makes the same har on the Gemara. Huh?
Where does this leave you with the get the bean?
I don't know. but I was thinking, Lamaisa, I was thinking a couple of things. First of all, it would come out, if this is true, that there would be a chumrah by Hilchos Gerushin, a chora kula by a lot of other things. By Hilchos Gerushin, I looked around a little bit, but we know that we're supposed to look at someone and see whether they look like a shota, and then be bodek if they look like a shota. Chorel, if you this, we should also be asking for their mental health records in order to make sure that they're being treated properly for depression. Because even though it's true that it's not bechlal shota, it's possible that it's a psul. So and a psul d'Rabbanan. But l'chora, we should be asking for people's records. What?
I don't have to send psychiatrist. I can be again.
So what I thought the Rambam was mashma, but also what the tshuvas in the Achronim say is that whenever anyone is bodek someone with ruach ra, they pass. So it's not a
Yeah, but if in the past they had an unquestionable period of shtus, and they were and they've been hospitalized and have been on antipsychotic, but currently they're okay.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If we know that they're under control, so great, that's amazing. But you have to be able to know that they're under control. Yeah, I have to know that they're under control. So
without necessarily having to pass
but
I'll find out the word today, this moment, place out is it that you show us all over or not?
But if he's
I can use him a quadratic equation.
no, but if he but
And you know,
but
the decision's rational. It's gonna sound rational.
meaning how do we know that his
In the
decision
moment,
is?
it'll sound
Quadratic
rational.
equation's not enough. I mean, today when they have forensics guys go to court, they do a far more extensive question than the hein, love,
Ha-
we had a 6.
ha-
That's considered very, very superficial.
How do we know that his decision is not coming from his depression and it's a real decision?
You think so?
Meaning he's going home right after this. He's getting right into bed. Right before this, he was in bed.
No, I can make very bad decisions knowingly, and I'm not ashamed.
But maybe you're ruach ra.
That's what he's trying to say.
But you're ruach ra.
That's not ashamed.
But that's another psul. Another psul is ruach ra.
A lot of
No,
elected
only
officials-
when the world gets so bad. This ain't that you show us
There are a
all
lot
over.
of elected officials that make very poor decisions and
Well, they do that purposely for other reasons.
Ah,
And they're not straight. They're worse things.
right. So the Maisa in other places you'd be able to be very makel the chora by someone with depression. There's a discussion of whether, according to what I'm saying.
Just simple plain depression. He passes our test. So it's
Right.
not a shame.
Right. Yeah.
Ordinary depression is not. I don't know whoever said.
So my shaila was, what about hanachas tefillin?
Who he misses?
What?
Is he who he misses?
It's no. Is he mechuyev in hanachas tefillin? Meaning, I know that a chol she'im bo sakana. I know that's a shaila in the achronim about whether or not someone that's a chol she'im bo sakana, whether or not they're mechuyev in mitzvahs. I hear dafka by tefillin. I had a shaila because by tefillin the lashon of the Rambam is anyone that daito is eno miyushavas alav is pater mitfillin. Right.
That's a new tool altogether in tefillin.
Yeah, but a lot of people
But-
say,
right.
so eliminates a lot of people.
Yes, people. Whatever.
But my point just was is that
We just cut to not the subcom meeting. I'll leave you on.
my point is that there are, this is something, a Venn diagram is a good mashal. This is something that will have things that only Ruach Ra has. This has things that are obviously very connected to Gittin, and it has and I think that because of that, it would make more sense that since there are nafkaminas, that we say that this is that we don't say, oh, the question isn't, is this a shota necessarily. So that's really what I wanted to say. Maisa would have other nafkaminas also, tefillah, right? Other things where it's about yishuv hadas, and if there is yishuv hadas, so then that might be the only time where you're pater. L'chora by any other mitzvah, so l'chora you would be chayiv for what? The ones he's shaykh to. Right, the ones he's shaykh to.
But that leaves me with one serious problem, unless it's not latest in seas. What was the time of the ones possible to get to the If you'll tell me that the Machlokes Mitzias, I can buy that. That they examined it and they saw one thing, and the others examined and they saw something else. But it sounds like a classic case of depression, and there was nothing wrong with the guy's logic, or what I call reason. He was rational.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So
Moshe with the guy thinks he's Mashiach.
so that person,
Perfectly rational.
but that person is jumping on top of a tree without his clothes on, also in Rav Moshe's tshuva, meaning that.
I mean, Rav Moshe probably went a little bit too far.
Right.
But everybody said is there are people who thought they were Mashiach,
Right.
and they talked themselves into it.
Yeah. No. So that's what.
Perfectly honest.
Yeah,
So-
but
There is
bipolar.
also-
So that's what I was. That's what.
Something called
Who did it?
There's also something called delusional disorder.
Who-
Delusional disorder, which they have a fixed type of delusion, but it is not pervasive and they're not overly psychotic. They have one area in which they completely make no sense, but as opposed to someone paranoid.
The person who's delusional is not.
So that's.
No, I'm
So
saying,
that's also.
no, I'm saying as opposed to someone
So-
schizophrenia has symptoms across multiple domains. The people, so people with delusional disorder, they believe one thing, but other not because of schizophrenia, won't respond to medication, they don't respond to anything,
Yes.
but they're rational in all other areas.
Yes, but they're perfectly rational.
So that's what I was being meramis to in the beginning. That a lot of the chuvas on this, including the ones in Get Me Vina, there's so many different There's so it's very so it was very hard for me to parse through them.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
That's really the point of today's Chaburah.
Ooh.
That when you look at you're saying it, not me. When you sort of look through these shuvas, they're not always dealing with in a systematic manner. They seem to hop on one something or another, and they think it's a simon shtus, but it's not a simon shtus. They don't realize that it can be isolated and not be accompanied by other things.
Right.
And we won't even talk about people who think that not fitting in socially is a form of shtus. We won't talk about that.
But I hope Rebbe wasn't being lafuke, but it was
I will tell you, Rav Fagin,
Next week, no Chaburah.
this was enough time for 2 weeks.
For my 6 years, Nicole is the only time anyone has ever got a "you're right" from Rabbi Bleich at the end of the Chaburah. I think that was pretty remarkable.
You're wrong.
Very good. Very good.
Never seen any
Next
of
week.
Many folks got already up. I've never seen any of the four.
Next week there's no Chaburah on the.
No, I've never seen any of the four symbols.
What is